Welcome to the Extraordinary Leadership Podcast. This is a place for you if you aspire extraordinary, fueled with inspiration, meaningful conversations, and valuable insights that are going to support your journey of becoming an extraordinary leader and making truly a difference in your organization and living a desired life. My name is Dagmara Asbreuk, and I am your host in this show, and I'm also founder and CEO of Extraordinary Leadership. I'm bringing you exceptional leaders, change makers from different industries, sharing their stories, and above all, what made them most successful, impactful, and happy. I'm also sharing my discoveries from navigating and leading 15 years in a corporate world, building my business, and empowering senior and executive leaders to go to their next level with their organizations and in their lives. I hope that you are excited and ready, so let us begin. Welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Leadership Podcast. Today I have Andrea Petrone with me, executive and performance coach to executives in leadership teams, helping them to build extraordinary legacy. He's also a host of a podcast that is called World Class Leaders Show. And he brings over 20 years of his own practical experience from leading in a corporate world. Today with Andrea, we are discussing the importance of building an extraordinary legacy for leaders and the importance of humility and humanity in leadership. Andrea is sharing with us his own story of moving from being overconfident to humble and self-aware leader. And we also dive into the challenges that ambitious leaders face and what are the benefits of hiring an executive coach to be more successful, impactful, and build the extraordinary legacy. Welcome, Andrea, to the show.
Thank you so much, Dagmara, for your kind introduction. You covered the territory, and most importantly, it's a pleasure for me to be with you and spending some time and sharing ideas and observation from all our experience.
A pleasure on my side, and it's always nice to, meet like-minded people thanks to the platform called LinkedIn. So, yes. Andrea, let's start with you before we go to all of this great topics of leadership. And I would love to hear your stories and, of course, why you do what you do and what brought you here.
Yeah, so look, when people ask us this type of question, then we're always trying to find out where shall we start and what makes sense, for the audience to hear from us. And I think what be maybe a good thing to discuss or to consider is I'm coming from the corporate world. So I've been in a corporate world for most of my career, and I enjoyed it. I had that, as you said before, I had an opportunity to work in so many different countries, and that was thanks to my job. So I work in oil and gas for many years, and as you are aware, oil and gas brings you to not necessarily places like, Paris, New York, or, London. It actually brings you to places where you really start to understand, how the world works. So I work in West Africa, North Africa, also Middle East, where you are right now. So I had the pleasure to work in many different areas. And I also had such a fast track career. So in a matter of 7 and 8 years, I already became managing director in an organization. So honestly, everything was working in incredible way. So those kind of things, moment that everything that you do, it sounds like it's working, and that's my experience. So I had this sort of first part of my career that I felt like I was invincible, to be honest. Now that is positive from one hand, but that is also negative because it starts to create some biases about our ability to perform. So I started to feel like I didn't need preparation for something, or I didn't need to go extra mile because I was getting anyway results. That sort of attitude, that was more unconscious than conscious, to be fair, but that's what happened. And that's sometimes what happens in leader. And I'll come back to this point because that's a typical bias of people that are in charge. So what happened though is after this incredible time, I had some sort of, as everyone, one or two failures, setbacks, whatever you want to call it, that brought me back to the reality that I was human, I was normal, I had flaws, and I had so many things that were not actually working. but I needed, unfortunately, that time to understand that I was not perfect. I was not invincible as I thought I was. And that changed completely my life, Dagmara, because what happened is I hired a coach. And for me at the time was a no-go solution. I hate the idea of actually having a coach, because no, I don't need to be fixed. I don't need a coach. I'm good enough, etc.,
Mm,
etc., etc. I'm sure it
mm.
sounds familiar, right?
Oh
That
yes,
sort of
oh yes, oh yes. That's this little voice of ego, right?
yes, exactly right. So it's
Mm,
it's a kind of familiar place for many. But then I did because I felt like no, there is something wrong here. And by the way, there was nothing wrong, but it was my own inner voice that was, here hammering in my head. And look, everything changes since that time. By the way, it was not necessarily an incredible coach. It was not the coach itself that made the difference. What made the difference was I developed this sense of humility, of being humble, and to be human as a person that I didn't have before. I just lost it along the way. And that sense of humility did not only help me to create awareness that I didn't have at the time about myself, the blind spot I had, but most importantly, it really created a new identity for myself. And that new
mm,
identity has shaped me since that time and created something different than who I am today. So, and the second part of the career, not surprisingly, was way even better than the first part, although it was already successful. And in the hindsight, my observation is it hasn't been my practical understanding of things, my business experience, my skills. It was our approach, my leadership roles in a different way, thanks to the sense of humanity and humility. And that is something that it's one of my features. So when people talk about me, they talk about that as one of the things they see in me. So what happened after that? Great career, moved to consulting. Yeah, that's a little bit probably a bit more boring about the single experiences. But what happened is in end of 2018 I had this sort of epiphany when I lost a little bit traction of my North Star. I wasn't sure where I was heading to, that kind of
mm,
philosophical question that sometimes we ask to ourselves. And then I
mm.
realized that coaching, a specific way of coaching, was for me what was missing in my life. I was making people happy. I was making everybody successful, but how about me? And that was, for me, was a sense of fulfilling that was missing. And fulfilling was in coaching, executive coaching, was to me that element, the leverage for getting back to my sense of fulfillment and also helping others using all my learning, etc. And after that, I created my journey. I created my practice, beginning in 2019. And now, I would say I've been quite successful in creating that practice, working with international clients, launching as you're doing now with all my good luck. My podcast is quite successful at the moment. We might probably go back to this, writing a book. So it's just exciting time about my personal development.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I like the different ways how we are awakening, right, on our journey of growth to
Yes.
some extent. Interesting how it came for you, because it's a lot of resonance in my story as well. From a challenging times comes really an epiphany or breakthrough and shift into how we
Yes.
lead, and which leads us to be more successful and more aligned and more fulfilled, and the discovery of purpose. So many connecting points when I was hearing you. So many questions that were popping up, and I think for the purpose of today, one first that comes to me is about that identity shift, and actually what happened. You mentioned about awareness, identity. Tell us a little bit more. What did you really learn about yourself in that first, maybe, or maybe other coaching engagements, but the first one made a shift already, right? So it brought you to a different level. So what did you really discover about yourself, and what is that identity about?
Yeah, it's an amazing question, and I think that's something that I don't know. I'm sure that you do in your coaching practice. Something that I always bring to my clients during coaching, because at some point we have some sort of identity crisis. Now,
Mm,
there are so many people saying that we shouldn't change our identity. Our identity is fixed. Our identity is who we are, etc. I don't believe to this. what I believe is our identity actually can be shaped and changed based on how our life is changing too. And what I always say is, and what I realized at that time was, Dagmara, is identity is just a narrative. It's nothing that is attached to you that you can't change because that's how you are and you are built that way. There is all this, noise coming from media, maybe from education, etc. That says that's who you are. You can't change it. You can change few things, but your core identity will never change because that's you're done in certain ways, a part of your DNA. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. What I buy is your core personal values will probably never change, and they're not supposed to change. But whatever is not core, there is going to be a really fluid change for yourself. It's something that you learn about yourself, and you change it based on how the different purposes, come to life in any certain point. Because we are not born with a sense of purpose where we know where. Sometimes, yes, the lucky guys probably they know when they're already kids what the sense of purpose in life. The reality is most of us, they develop the sense of purpose, the why that you asked before, along the way. And so your identity should change based on what is the why that is driving you. So to me was important moment, because I realized that what drove me until that point was not really something that I wanted to drive in the future. I was much more, as many leaders, I would say, I was attached to the sense of success. I thought the career was the only thing that was important for me. And your actions become consistent with the identity that you have about sex, about your spirit of be competitor, you wait to win, and all of that. At that point, I think what really changed to me was, first of all, I realized that was just a narrative that I created for myself. There was nothing true about that. It was just a narrative. I perceived my narrative as the only truth about this. So there was only one way to go. There were no options at that time. That experience, that moment of peak and the moment of realization, etc., it just helped me to understand there was just one version of truth, and there are many other versions. I was much more interested into other versions. There was more about personal development, growth, learning, all the things that now I think made me still very curious about learning every single new piece about what is out there. So really, that is the major identity difference that and look, all the new behaviors that I created that were then consistent with the new sense of purpose that I had, which I think is important. For example, yes, career, yes, but there is not only career. I started to think more about my time. I started to think about me in terms of self-care, not as as a winner at all costs. So there are many different choices that then you make along the way when you start to realize that.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, and absolutely, I am an advocate of the same, because there are still some people probably that thinking that nothing can be changed, and also there is a lot of misconceptions about what does it mean to be authentic, true self, and all of that. And I think I like what you mentioned about narrative, because at the end, identity is a set of beliefs that you believe in about yourself, right? And how you see yourself, first of all. And obviously, coaching is a pretty profound way on how you can shift that narrative. And first, like you, discover that the narrative that you're buying into is maybe just one version of it. And usually it comes from childhood experiences and different perceptions acquired along the way, which we are completely unaware of. I always like to see like programming that we have in subconscious mind, right? And the way I see the identity, that's why I ask this question, is also in looking and reflecting back on my journey, because I had also epiphany in the middle of my career in corporations, which was also coming from facing challenges. And what my reflection on identity is of course a huge driver of our behavior, is the core of our behaviors, the core of our attitude, is a core that brings us to the results that we desire and energy that we give, right, or unleash in the system. And my view on identity, to one of the points that you mentioned, is Actually, at the core is a discovery. The life is discovery of who you truly are at your core, and how you shape or peel the onions of who you truly are in essence, and advocate for unleashing your potential. This kind of
Yes.
part of it. So maybe that ties in with the narrative, because there can be so many. So I think it's so instrumental for leaders to discover it, but never also let go, as you said, this curiosity part of unleashing what's more there, right? What's more potential there, and yeah, it shapes our results in the end and impact.
Yeah, and look, I think it's this idea of, again, I think it's important that we both confirm that and reinforce this point is whatever we say to ourselves, which
Mm,
essentially is what is driving us every single day in every single action, is just a narrative. There is nothing true about that. And I think it's
mm,
important that we say that. And because for people really it's difficult to accept that, because we feel like whatever we we say to ourselves, it becomes the truth. And when it becomes the truth, it doesn't give you any more access to anything else, because that is one fundamental truth about things. So it's important. That goes back to the mindset, why it's important.
absolutely. And I think it's also important to discover where this narrative comes from, because this is that I always
Yeah.
see that there are two parts of ourselves, right? The ego and the soul, the essence, higher mind, higher soul, higher self, whichever narrative or description we
Yes.
want to choose, actually. So we need to learn, I think for leaders is a very important capability, how to manage this mind, and also know which narrative we want to choose to, because in the end it's about choices. Because like
Totally.
you at some stage, discovering also the meaning of your life, or deepening the meaning and sense of your life, you also chose for a certain direction and chose for certain narrative, right? And that's drive and shape your life and
Because
business now.
with
So yeah.
awareness comes choices, as you say. Without awareness,
Yeah.
choices will never be available to us. It's a great
Yeah.
point what you made.
So maybe last question around you from that time, were you, because you were still, before you jump into serving leaders, that shift happened for you when you were still in corporations, right? So what have you seen different after that shift, and probably many others that came, but what have you seen different as a leader? What's shifted? What's changed, actually?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, for myself, what I started to see different things in people, because I was much
Mm,
more um I was welcoming more perspective about things I've seen, especially in people. Meaning, when we get a little bit stuck into our own mind and our own success story, so essentially what we see in people is always one single version. It's a little bit black and white. I think for me has been starting to see different nuances and colors in people, and there's been a
mm,
huge difference for me, for my ability to actually to have the second level of success, which is interesting because when you start to relate to people in a different way, you start to really to see what I say potential in people, rather than just opinionated or
mm,
biased version of people. And that's, to me, has been a massive, massive change, because I started really to get the most out of people, to look for the best out of people. Now, I'm not only talking about employees or people I was dealing at the time, but also customers. So I did a so most of my
mm,
work on the second part was actually very customer face roles. So I had a lot of, because I drove, the growth on a consulting firm before launching my own. And then, as you know, when you have your own practice, you're selling. So you do definitely, most of your work is business
mm,
development, in a different way, of course, than traditional sales. But you're meeting people every single day.
mm,
And I started to understand better how people think, and not being judgmental, biased, opinionated about them, and see the best of
mm,
them. I think has reflected in the way I'll show up in front of them in a different way. And I
mm,
know, I know people with me, they click quite quickly, because probably they see
mm,
that I'm generally interested in them, in what they're going through, and in the possibilities to become something better. So I don't know whether that is the reason, but that's, to me, yes, definitely one of the things that changed for me, and I'm sure has some sort of connection with then my results.
yeah. So I hear being open to see also beyond what we can see, because usually this is widening the lens, right?
Yes.
And also being less judgmental, which is obviously sensed between human beings, because whatever we think, even if we don't say that, that's sensed between people. So obviously that is also helping in relationships and building trust. And that's such an important thing in leadership, isn't it?
It is. That's the first part, I would say. The second part, the second major change has been how I learned to deal with my own insecurities, but confidence and failures and all of that. I started to feel at ease with that. So in the first part, if you remember, I felt invincible. So when you're feeling that way, when something happens to you, that hits hard on you, on your confidence, on your, say, you started to reject that, say, no, it can't be true. It can't happen to me. The second part of my career was, yeah, that can absolutely happen. And I'm taking responsibility. I'll find a way to show up differently. So I started to take more responsibility rather than feeling victim. I started to feel much more humble and admitting my own mistakes, be much more authentic with people. And my team, I created such a great relation with my team moving forward. So that's the second part. That was primarily on me and my perceptions about what was happening to me.
Yeah, it shifts from victimhood to taking ownership, isn't it? And
exactly right.
I resonate those times when difficult things put a lot of doubts, lot of doubts of, are you going to make it? Are you actually a leader? All of this I had that actually were born for me to lean into coaching. And so we can be much more trusting ourselves, and that's what we give them back, to trust the others. So Andrea, you coaching and working with C-level leaders, helping them to be world-class leaders. So let's unpack, what does it mean to be a world-class leader?
Yes, and that's, I think, is a fundamental question, because it could be easily, considered as a buzzword. Look, there are really different versions. What's important to me is working with leaders. So, by the way, most of my work is with CEOs. So CEOs of large companies, and with the leadership team. That's normally, I stop there, although sometimes I get involved in strategic transformation initiative with them, but they are still the sponsor of this initiative. What I'm fascinated about is working with people that have this sense of legacy, the sense of creating impact on the future. And the future has a different colors and connotation. It could be the future of the company, but honestly, it would be even more interesting to me if they want to create an impact on the future of the society. So there is actually something that is going to improve the way how we live. And that is something that really resonates with me. So I tend to work with people that have this some sort of attributes, attitudes. So in other words, I don't work with people that are just, interested to maintain their job, or to do the same old, or to have an incremental improvement about what they're doing. Yes, sometimes you ended up working with people like them, but that's not really me. So I tend to work with people that have a bigger purpose in life. They want to do something. They want to live something extraordinary. As it resonates, with the way how you do your own activity. For me, is living something, behind them. That's why I'm interested into the legacy part. So to me, extraordinary world-class leader is people that have something, different, something not ordinary. And by the way, we should go back exactly to the definition of extraordinary. Extraordinary sounds like something impossible. No, extraordinary is actually something that is not ordinary. It's not what other people do. It's something different, something more. And to me, has to be the more part, has to be on living something behind them. And that is exciting me in an incredible way. And I interview in my own podcast people, I try to interview CEOs that actually fit exactly the criteria. And I've been lucky to probably have spotted the right ones so far. And these are all people, in the World Class Leader Show podcast, they're coming and explaining they're there for a bigger reason. They're there for creating something extraordinary to leave an impact. And that is not only, exciting me or themselves, but excite the entire organization when you have a leader that has this such a big aspiration, a bold future they want to create. So that is, if you like, the sweet spot. So not everyone, by the way, not everyone wants to play that game, and it's fine that not everyone
Absolutely.
needs to play that
Yeah.
game. There are different reasons why sometimes as a leader you need to manage the status quo because you don't have options, maybe for a short period of time, but it can be your career. I don't see it as a fulfilling career for myself. That's how I created my own business. So anyway, that is to me, how I characterize a world-class leader.
Nice. So it's just impact driven, right?
Yeah.
So I define it as impact driven. I do resonate with it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to work with leaders who are impact driven. I have many of those too. So yes, it's just a different energy, and the energy that they unleash in an organization, and inspiration, of course, that comes from that. And usually they tend to be very growth driven and progressive. So they do look into the solutions which are above traditionally, which when I think about what extraordinary leader is, and it is just a different way of creating a greater results, and of course leaving something behind and making impact. So of course it's about your conscious choice of putting an effort into it. And that is what I believe also distinguish the ordinary and extraordinary leaders is ownership that you have also in your journey, right? Taking an ownership for yourself and for growing yourself that led you to and new places and a bigger success as well. So in this realm, Andrea, what do you see are common challenges of those leaders who are ambitious, who are visionary, who, have aspirations? What are their challenges that you are noticing and observing?
Yeah, so there are many. There are many because they are not because they're necessarily CEOs, but there are many just because they're humans. And as humans, they get trapped in many different perceptions / biases / issues that come with leading a human organization. So it's all about the human systems. That's really what happens in the organization. But here's the thing, Dagmara, is I'm writing a book about the legacy CEOs. What does it mean today to become a legacy CEO? And it's all centered about the sense of humanity. Just to go back exactly to my experience, I think the major issue there these leaders are facing right now is they are under incredible level of pressure because the business has changed dramatically in the last few years. So pressure is higher. The expectations are even higher. The time available for them to make an impact is shorter. So if you consider all of that, most of the CEOs are facing a very silent battle with themselves, first of all, because they need to create all of that in a situation where they don't have the luxury to do it, in a calm environment. We know in 10 years' time, they can't. But they don't say that. They don't say that. They are not going around the organization saying, sorry, I don't have time to make an impact, or, I'm fighting with myself or maybe with the board to get convinced that we need more in finance or time or whatever. So the role of a CEO has been always quite isolated, and probably sometimes this sense of living in an artificial bubble. But at the moment, on top of that, they are facing this incredible challenge to perform, to live that sense of impact without having the right conditions to do it. So look, I think it's fair to say the sense of confidence is, broadly speaking, I know it's a generalization, but broadly speaking, has diminished. Just because when you feel that you are not making a huge impact because these conditions are in place, for everyone, that is going to have a hit on your confidence because, am I really good enough to do that? Or, and when you start to focus on that, and that's some sort of inner voice, pop up in your head, well, you guess what's going to happen? You start to feel much more stressed. You start to feel that you're not able to deliver, and you start to look at things more as a risk and as an opportunity, and then all the typical consequences of that. So that is definitely an area that I would say is at the moment the major challenge as well, which is a consequence of that. All the consequence on their health, and by the way, also relationship they have. So it's not uncommon for CEOs at the moment living in a very stressful moment at work, but also personally, because you know better than me, right? So we when we face that sense of pressure and stress, at some point it's going to have an impact on our life. So it's not really an easy moment for CEOs leading organizations. Now there is some sort of cynicism in people when I post it, and I do quite often on LinkedIn. People say something like, "Oh yeah, it's easy for them anyway because they are incredible paycheck or whatever, they have benefits, etc." Well, for the CEOs I work with, I can't see that. I don't definitely see that sense of high pay, high benefits, easy life, trendy life, fun, etc. I don't see that. That's not what, by the way, it might exist, but not in my world. So
and I think it's this complexity of the world, which is obviously increasing.
yes.
And when you match it with complexity of your inner world, that complexity, how do you navigate your inner world of mind, which is a lot of mind game in leadership, especially higher you go, emotions, energy, biases, beliefs, all of that, that is complexity by itself. So the more complex world becomes, you want to ensure that that complexity you can handle, right? Or you get support in that complexity. So from that on, from having that awareness, what is the best advice for C-level leaders facing that challenge?
Yeah, so it's not. Yeah, look, it's not an easy answer and with a quick fix, right? Because that requires a journey of, as you mentioned before. First of all, I wouldn't take it for granted that there is such a very high level of awareness in leaders about that. Meaning, the most educated. Now, when I say educated, doesn't mean from a pure skills standpoint. When I say educated, meaning educated on leadership. So there are some people they have a quite good sense of awareness, and they trigger that every single time by asking feedback, by taking feedback, by journaling, by reflection. There is all of that in some leaders exist, and that is a great starting point to deal with the inward world that you just mentioned. But look, for the most part, I have to say, some CEOs, they don't have that level of awareness for a number of reasons. One is because, first of all, people, they are not giving to them feedback. So they face like, okay, I don't know what's going on, and I don't know whether I'm effective enough, etc. So there is all this element of people around them, they're pleasers, they're not saying exactly what they think about, there's no transparency, you name it. So there is an element of that is not helping. So the other people, they are much more mindful in the way how they are looking at themselves. I posted yesterday a great conversation from a CEO in the US, Ravi Venkatesan. And Ravi has created his own leadership approach. By the way, he's a CEO of hundreds people organization. And what he says is, look, my approach is a heart-based and inward leader. It's not something common that you hear from a CEO. CEOs, they say, I'm all about heart. I'm all about looking inwards. I'm all about developing consciousness in the organization. God, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear a CEO.
That's a high maturity leader.
It's a high maturity leader. That's what I was pointing to. That is a very highly educated leader, and educated in terms of consciousness, in terms of leadership, in terms of mindsets, all of that. So first, I wouldn't take for granted, the sense of awareness, and that is the starting point. The second point is, I think, is there are so many biases that kick in people, and primarily in CEOs. In my experience, being the confirmation bias is the most critical bias that exists, especially in CEOs. Confirmation bias is probably one of the worst bias that we have, that we created, because a confirmation bias essentially is gonna driving you to assume so many things about what's going on. And when you start assuming and not challenging your own perception, unfortunately, is the beginning of the end for yourself, because you don't question anything anymore. So if you don't question that the problem in the organization maybe is not your team, but is yourself, and you take it for granted, and you're biased around it, you say, yeah, it's them, it's not me. guess how much change you can make on yourself? Zero. You can't, because you don't see the angle, you don't see the perception. So really, most of my work with clients is working back and say, okay, let's start questioning all the perception that you have. First of all, recognizing them and questioning them and making sure that you're not so attached to this perception they turn to the truth, and then you start assuming what needs to be done if it doesn't work for you. So we do a lot of work on awareness, mindset shift. And once you do it, then normally everything happens, because people started to see different possibilities in front of them. They start to deal with people in a different way. They start to listen more intentionally. They start to ask for more feedback. There is domino effect on positive things that CEOs do when they work on that way. Because otherwise, if you start working on with CEOs and you start to question their behaviors or giving them instruction on how they should do things differently, you're not going very far with leaders, because they say, I'm sorry, I have my own experience, I know how to do things. And that's the confirmation bias. So that bias, if it exists, is going to be a really problem.
Yeah, I can see that. And also what you mentioned before is this isolation, and also how people feel of what they can say, what they cannot say to such a leader. So it's also how you create, of course, that space of psychological safety, that you allow people even to come with a feedback. But very often that doesn't happen because you are not aware. That's where obviously you and me and people like us come into place. For me, if I'm just thinking about any leader, but let's say predominantly any CEO would benefit from a coach, because basically that's something that is like, you want to be a high performing athlete, you exactly the same.
Exactly.
Because of what you said, also there is so much what you don't know, and these biases are just limiting your impact, effectiveness, success, and all of that, happiness, well-being. So I was just wondering, when you were sharing, out of curiosity, what's the point that leaders come to you?
And that is an interesting question. And he has a different answers. But I would say predominantly there are few factors that probably. So first of all, one step back, I think is important to recognize, also following your point, is the number of CEOs now they hire a coach is higher than the past. So there is a much more awareness about the importance of a coach as an enabler, as someone is going to really accelerate your success journey, rather than because you are someone that needs to be fixed. First of all, that already is helping a lot. The second part I would say is normally when there is a burning platform, Dagmara. So when there is a burning platform, normally the CEOs are much more inclined to get someone helping along the way. And the burning platform could well be, financial crisis, or could be operational crisis, or could be completely in need of restructuring, reorganization, transforming the entire organization. Those moments where you can't really just wait, and you need the best minds around you to support you along the journey, because it's a pivotal time for yourself. So that is one typical reason. The other reason is it's a little bit easier, is the fact that many CEOs, they need a coach when they are new in the job. So I tend to do more work with the first-time CEOs, not surprisingly, because the first-time CEOs is the first time they are in the role. And so it's really like a new world. So if they have some sort of vulnerability, that's normally the preference, using a coach, hiring a coach, because they need someone that can help him or help her to go through the first 90 days, or maybe in a year. So I would say that is the normal circumstances. Seasoned CEOs, they're already working, maybe it's the third or fourth engagement. They don't probably hire CEOs, at least don't necessarily hire CEOs like me. Maybe they have different needs. But I would say these are the 2 or 3 elements that are normally quite common when it comes to getting involved with people they want to hire a CEO, a coach, sorry.
Yeah. So the classical, the challenges or bigger roles or change that they want to drive in the organization. And what would you say to leaders who are pretty seasoned? Seasoned means it can be, having 20 years experience. maybe they don't face challenges yet, but they are not far away. What would you say to those who are sometimes even not believing that that's help necessary because they have so much experience already?
It's, it's difficult to it's difficult to look. First of all, as you are aware, as we all coaches do, at least I suppose most of us do, we don't persuade people to hire a coach, right? It's not something we do. You will never be able to persuade something to hire a coach. It's up to them whether they see it as an opportunity for them. You can offer an idea, but at the end of the day, if you don't feel it, you will never hire a coach. And if you do, you're not going to be committed. So what's the point of using a
Absolutely.
coach, right? So if it doesn't start from within, I think it's going to be really difficult to help someone because they don't see the need for that. Now, back to my previous point is that is true unless something happens, as happened to me. Unless something happens, that could be another burning platform, is you're receiving a bad feedback. Or, and that's quite, by the way, very, very, very common, is I coach leaders, they went through internal interviews for succession planning and they didn't make it. So they didn't make it, and then they say, oh, there is something missing here. And now they know either it's structural feedback or no. That's the time that normally, even if they're seasoned, they say, guess what? There is something missing.
Yeah.
There is something missing in me that maybe is worth exploring with someone else. So, but again, it's a burning platform per se. It's a failure, it's a setback, something that happened, negative feedback. They didn't pass an interview, or maybe they're looking for a new job, but they are failing in finding some. And they're starting to question their own ability to find something else because maybe there is something that doesn't work, when they talk to people. So it's a different element. So it can definitely happen with seasoned. I would just say, if you are a newcomer, if you're a newbie, if you are someone for the first time in a senior leadership role, that is an easy trigger for them. Otherwise, something needs to happen.
Yeah. I dream, right, on vision that going towards, think about conscious mature organization. I would see that, 360 feedbacks, which are invaluable, or any types of feedbacks to the leadership, could be just normalized. Because that's what you're actually pointing out all the time. Is the lack of a feedback, lack of reflection, which follows also after the feedback, right? Which might be the missed opportunity. And it's nothing to do with you are someone to fix.
Exactly.
That's the narrative we have to really put under the cap. So basically, it's this strive for extraordinary that, yes, some leaders have more, some leaders have less. But especially think about the impact on organization, because at the end, it's not for you only. You are leading an organization or leading a team or leading a function. So it's from the perspective of an impact, though.
Agreed.
Cool. I know that we can carry on so much of the questions because, well, being passionate about the same, there's so much topics to touch. But I know that also our time is slowly coming to the end. So, Andrea, before wrapping it up, what is the message that you would like to pass to leaders listening to this show?
I think the message could be: don't stop dreaming of and aspiring to the possibilities to make a difference. Because maybe the current reality right now is not helping you to see that, because you are constrained by a number of factors in your ability to do that. But look, we always say, and there are some amazing quotes that say, pressure is a privilege, right? So when you're at the top, yes, amazing benefits, status, recognition, etc. But also you have an incredible opportunity that so many other people don't have in life. Because look, if you think about it as a target audience, the CEO's club is small. There are not so many CEOs in the world compared to many other leaders and people in the organization. At the end, in any organization, there is only one. So once you are there, don't waste the opportunity to make a difference, because otherwise you will be an operational manager, operational leader, administrator. Anyone else can do your job, to be fair. If you are there, there is a reason, and don't waste it, because there are so many people. I'm sure you would agree with me, Dagmara. So many people, they aspire to be a CEO in the organization, but they don't have opportunity to be there. Now that you have it, so don't waste it. Make a difference and don't stop believing to the possibilities to do it, because it's possible. I've seen people transforming completely their organization by just believing the possibility to do it. But it has to start with you. So that's my message.
Yeah, beautiful. I really absolutely love the inspirational message here that you're passing and call to action. And yes, that is going to change so many other people's lives, because it doesn't matter which size of the organization you lead, but that's really, in a sense, what we truly aspire from every leader, to make a difference in our lives and our society, that you also mentioned. So yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. Andrea, how people can connect with you? I know they're very active on LinkedIn. Tell us about a podcast. So how's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, as you say, is the best place. I'm writing every single day, so that's probably the best place. And then, yes, if you listen to this podcast because you love podcasts, so if you like what Dagmara is doing, you might probably like as well my work. And yes, it's called the World Class Leaders Show. It's a podcast where I interview global CEOs, and sometimes I share my own views. And that is available on the platform, and also now on YouTube. So we are also on that channel, and looking forward for my book. It's coming, will come out probably around December, January. So there's still a little bit time, but yeah, if you connect with me, you will get anyway some sort of notification when we're ready.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one as well. Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for this, meaningful conversation, first of all, I think, that we had on such an important topic. So I think, to summarize with your last message, for me, the sentence that comes that I really love is, be the change that you want to see.
That's it.
And it all starts with you. And that's
it.
So important for our leaders today. So thank you very much, Andrea. I'm looking forward maybe to another chat with you, who knows? And for now, sending you all the best to you from Dubai.
Thank you so much, Romara. It's been amazing spending time with you. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you for listening and watching to this episode of Extraordinary Leadership Podcast. I hope you find inspiration, insights, and ideas that can help you be more impactful and successful in leading your organization or team to the next level. Do subscribe to this channel to follow this podcast and share it with other leaders who might benefit from it too. I wish you a fantastic day, and please remember, be the change that you want to see. Until next time.